It started as writing, and right from the beginning you knew this was different. Because it was happening in small villages, market towns. And then it wasn't on the TV anymore. It was in the street outside. It was coming through your windows. It was a virus, an infection. By the time they tried to evacuate the cities, it was already too late. The infection was everywhere. The day before the TV and radio stopped broadcasting, there were reports of infection in Paris and New York. You didn't hear anything more after that.
First, there was the night. Then, there was the dawn. And now it's the Day of the Dead. And to commemorate that, George A. Romero made a film where there is no daylight at all, hardly. Certainly the least amount of daylight out of this entire trilogy. Mm-hmm. So this is Diminishing Returns, and this is the third episode in our George Romero of the Dead series, as we're working our way through all of the George A. Romero zombie films. And I'm Calvin, and with me are Sol.
Did you really regret your choice of voice that you were putting on there at the start? It sounded like that was
just couldn't
hard work for you to maintain.
It's like when Dan Castellaneta did the original Homer voice. It was just too rough on his throat. He had to change.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, yes, I'm Sol, the #1 zombie expert on YouTube.
That's not true. I don't know of any others, but there must be
You should
more.
get on YouTube. Get your zombie channel going, Sol. Come on.
And Alan.
Oh, hello. Hello. Thank you, Calvin, for joining us. Fresh from reacting to the Living Daylights deleted scenes, I noticed.
Yes.
That's what I just watched before we started recording.
God, is that what you're down to now with No Time to Die being cast back?
Yeah, well...
So where are we up to? 2 weeks ago, we discussed Night of the Living Dead and Diary of the Dead and a whole load of remakes. Calvin, you were going to go away and watch the 1990 remake of Night of the Living Dead. So I think Alan and I were both quite upbeat about this one, weren't we? I think we both felt it was a pretty solid effort for a remake, all things considered. Could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, it could have been a lot worse.
I'm probably slightly more enthusiastic than Alan is then. I think particularly for when this film came out in 1990, where horror films were a bit in the sort of doldrums of, like, you know, Friday the 13th, 8, and Nightmare 7 or 6, or whichever the bad one was, and all this kind of stuff. It's not an era that I think of as being particularly good for horror. I thought this was actually held up quite well, in some aspects better than the original. I think it's weird that it felt like it dragged more, despite it being about 15-20 minutes shorter than the original. And I think there was just like a section of about 20 minutes where I felt like all I was watching was people nailing boards into walls and windows and doors and things.
I think my main issue with this one really is that the zombies just aren't remotely threatening in it. You know, it goes out of its way to make the character says, you know, Barbara says, like, God, you could just walk right past them. You know, and it's trying to make a point, as with many of these films, that the real threat are the other people and blah, 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 blah. But I think Night of the Living Dead from the 60s, the original, is legitimately quite scary. And I think a part of that is that these zombies do have a fair bit of menace about them.
And I thought that this film actually handled that very nicely. Like, I like that Barbara called it out as, like, they're actually really slow. Like, can we just run past them? And there's scenes in it where there's, like, a zombie just sort of, like, staggering around her, and she's not running away or anything. She's just, you know, she understands that she can just step aside and whatever, it's not going to get her. But they still manage to be very scary, in the numbers of them, I guess. And maybe it's because the makeup's just better.
Well, yeah, that's my other main thing. I mean, Tom Savini, of course, directing it. I think the makeup, the zombies, the way the zombies are realised, just visually, is fantastic.
It wasn't quite as badass action woman as I thought it was going to be, based on your comments in the first one. I still thought that she didn't go like full on like Mia Jovovich or anything like that. She was still quite frightened and everything. It felt real in a lot of ways, and I like that Tony Todd was kind of this sage figure to her in some key moments. He would sort of egg her on or whatever. I didn't like the actress an awful lot, but
why not?
Well, I didn't like any of the acting.
I think she does a really good job of selling the transition from a kind of librarian kind of take on Barbara to a kind of Ripley version of the character at the end. I think that's something that could be done very badly, and her performance helps make it believable.
But then I didn't think that I normally quite like Tony Todd, and I also thought he was a bit crap in this. I don't know if maybe they were just directed. I don't know. He felt very theatre in some of his motions and actions. It was an unexpected scare. I thought it was quite. I mean, I will say that it did scare me more than most of the Romero ones that we've seen. I guess Night of the Living Dead is scary and creeps me out and everything, and there's elements of Dawn that I find creepy, but here I actually found the zombies scary, I suppose. In Dawn of the Dead, it was more the whole society collapsing, all that kind of stuff that I found more frightening, whereas here I was like, oh wow, these are actually quite scary creatures.
So the ending is quite significantly different.
Yes.
So instead of them being whittled down, and we end up with the Ben character as Tony Todd in this film, it is the woman, Barbara, who gets out. And does she escape? She runs off or something? I can't remember. She actually leaves the house, doesn't she?
Yeah, and she goes off and becomes an action badass and shoots some zombies and survives the night and meets up with the gun-toting posse that turn up at the end of the film to save the day.
Like that, because it's not just like the gun-toting posse. They go full in on the these are total assholes kind of shtick. And like you can tell with her, she's like, okay, so this is civilization now. Like, this is what I've been rescued by. I'd rather be with the zombies kind of thing. So I quite like that they went all in on that. And then
so she leads them into the house to
so she's in theory to come back, and she knows there's a few of them still alive.
Yeah. And is it Tony Todd revealed first? Is that right? The first.
Yes.
So they open up the basement, and you're expecting to. If you are familiar with the original film, you're expecting Ben to have survived the night, but the big reveal is, oh, he's a zombie. And they shoot him, and she is, upset to see that he didn't make it. And then the next big twist is the Harry Cooper, is that his name, Harry Cooper?
Yeah.
Who, as we discussed in our previous episode, is reduced to a cartoonish level of dickery.
Yeah. It was quite, even though you'd braced me for it, I thought it was quite something. Just how, hitting his wife and all these kinds of things. It's like, oof.
Yeah, so even though he died in the original, he makes it through and survives in this one, and he's glad to see her, and she's so pissed off that he made it through the night despite being a horrible person. She just shoots him point blank, and then some guys come in, and she's like, oh yeah, another zombie for you here, just shot it for you.
Yeah.
What do we think of that?
Well, she kills him quite dispassionately and in cold blood, and it is a murder. And it's the sort of end point of her character, and it shows just how quickly and how far she's sort of slipped from humanity. I guess
it's quite an unjustifiable murder.
It's a step too far. I think it is just and they've painted him as a total asshole. Yes, but he's just an asshole. Like, if he'd deliberately tried to get them killed somehow, if he'd actually tried to kick them out of the house to protect himself, I don't know, something a little bit more very specifically murderous. But even then, I guess the whole point is to show how far she's slipped.
Well, I don't know. I always kind of get the impression that you're just meant to kind of be pissed off with her, and then kind of cheering at the end, like, yeah, you got what's coming, like in a kind of pulpy cinema kind of way.
I don't know. I guess they were trying to end it on something of a high, I guess, and
yeah, that's it. I think it's meant to be a kind of audience cheer moment, and it's also meant to be something of a surprise and a subversion of the original.
Yeah, I do like the fact that they do change the ending, because if you've seen the original, you're waiting for Tony Todd to pop out and then he gets shot. So I like that they kind of switched it up. Means you don't know what's coming. Yeah, there was another thing though.
Yeah.
You know how in the first film, the Coopers, they have their daughter and she's been bitten, but they don't know the consequences of that yet, and she's in the basement. In this film, they do the same thing, but they seem to have got like a 6-foot-tall adult to play the child. Why? What is that about? Because it's not, because the child does come out at one point and like becomes zombified and attacks people. So, but I was thinking like I know it's a bit of a pain to have kids on set and stuff, but it doesn't do that much. Like you could work around that easily. Plus, a kid zombie is scary. Like that works. Use it.
Yeah, I was going to say it's much more scary and more threatening, I think, because it's harder to bring yourself to kill a child zombie. So I agree. It's a weird decision on their part to do that, and I did wonder if it was just something to do with child labour.
Yeah.
I don't know. So, correct me if I'm wrong, Alan. I believe you gave this film a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I gave it a 6.
I gave it a 7.
Okay.
Fairly positive for what it is. Calvin, where do you land with this one?
A 6. I thought Alan was going to give it less than that. Just because as much as I liked elements of it, it did drag in parts. And I thought the acting was a bit overblown. And well, I guess it felt like George A. Romero apologising for Barbara in the first film, and that's like the sole reason for it to exist, at the detriment of, the other characters, particularly Tony Todd, I thought. So, yeah. It kind of futile in a lot of ways that it even exists.
Yeah, they've always said they only made it to try and make a bit of money off Night of the Living Dead, because they never made any off the 1968 film, because it immediately went into the public domain. So I can't fault them for that particularly.
Was it a success?
I think it made money. Yeah, I don't think it made heaps and heaps of money, but I think it was
It's started Tom Savini's directorial career, which is he's never done anything else. Forget it.
Well, it's weird because I think it's quite well directed.
Yeah,
to be honest, for what it is. Yeah. Anyway, so that's Night.
That's your
done.
starter. Yeah. Let's get on to our main course. We're continuing our journey through the Of the Dead series.
This was the end of the trilogy for the longest while. Day of the Dead. 1985, the year of the zombie, the year that also saw the film Reanimator and The Return of the Living Dead coming out. A very good year for zombie movies. Now, this film originally, it was meant to have a much bigger budget and be much closer in a lot of ways to Land of the Dead, but basically the studio financing it told George Romero that he would have to bring it in on an R rating, and he felt that would water down his vision. He didn't like having restrictions like that imposed on him, so he took, I think, literally half the budget on the proviso that he could do whatever he wanted with it and make it an NC-17
He's used to working on a budget though, and he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, so the film was rewritten quite hastily, I think, to accommodate a much smaller budget. The original film was set on a tropical island, and it still had the whole idea of kind of military group and a bunch of scientists training zombies, but I think it was a lot more elaborate. There were sequences with it was something like zombies being trained to attack people if they wore certain colours, but if you wore a special jacket that was a different colour, they wouldn't attack you, and things like that. So it's, it was basically going to be much bigger budget.
Sol, I know all about these zombie films that never end up getting made because I listened to a new podcast called How Didn't This Get Made? In which the latest episode was all about, zombie films, the sort of Romero films that never got made, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
I'm sure that's available
and that is, of course,
in all good stores.
Yeah, that is available. Go look for How Didn't This Get Made? Wherever you listen to your podcasts, that's out there. That's the longest episode of the show, actually. It's about 45 minutes, something like that. And that is the latest episode at the time of recording, but that means that by the time this episode goes out and you hear it, I think the entirety of season 1 will be available to listen to. Ooh. So if you don't like zombies, go listen to the Yellow Submarine episode. That's it's got some nice Beatles humour in it. You might prefer that. Okay,
so Day of the Dead, a little basic kind of synopsis is... post-apocalyptic zombie apocalypse, a bunch of survivors living in a bunker, and it's this tension between, the military personnel who are there with authority and then the scientists who are there trying to figure out how to solve a problem like a zombie, and the conflict between them. That's sort of roughly it.
Pretty much, yeah. And there is a scientist training a zombie to kind of bring out the intelligence that it still has. We've seen hints of the idea that zombies aren't completely brainless motor instinct things, as they're often portrayed in fiction. We've seen hints that that's not quite the case in George Romero's films. There is, of course, a zombie in Night of the Living Dead who picks up a brick to smash a window or a rock or whatever it is. There's a zombie who uses a trowel to stab a woman to death. And Dawn of the Dead, I think we see a couple of similar things. So Day of the Dead builds on that idea as well, kind of takes it to the...
Don't jump ahead.
I'd say the furthest extreme it should go to. But it does go
for later
past
in this
episode.
So we establish all those characters, and you know me, I like a film with a small group of characters all trapped together.
Well, this is it. I'm really interested to know what you make of this one, because, as you say, it's very much your thing, a group of characters trapped in a confined space. Quite low on like action and things like that. It is quite a talky film until the third act, really. So on one hand, it's exactly your kind of film, but then on the other hand, it is a zombie movie, and therefore you might hate it. So,
well,
you of course gave Dawn of the Dead, beloved classic piece of cinema, 3 out of 10 last week, didn't you, Alan?
I did, yeah. But it was a score born of frustration.
But you gave Night of the Living Dead a 9, so
Yeah, well that was it. First thing I noticed was that we do have more characters here than we do in the previous films, albeit we only have few characters. Once Dawn of the Dead actually gets to its principal element, there's 4 of them. Whereas in here you've got about a dozen, and there's 3 or 4 military guys who are really ancillary. They're obviously there for body count, and so we never quite get to know them. They're just about fleshed out enough so that we know they're there, and then they get killed, fair enough. But I do think it loses that focus and this real character-driven stuff that we've had in those previous 2 films.
Yeah, I think the cast in this film are pretty great, really, for a film at this level. So, they're on the cheesier side of things. They're, some of them are really chewing the scenery in places, but... In terms of having seen what, this could be with the likes of Diary and Survival of the Dead, I think this is a perfect example of casting those same kinds of stock characters with actors who just have enough personality and something about them to make that kind of writing work and jump off the page. And watching it again in preparation for this, it's the first time I've watched it in a while. I was struck by how good a lot of the supporting lesser people were, just in terms of making these on paper quite uninteresting soldier characters into something.
It never feels as deep as the previous 2 films, or the same quite the same style. But I think it's just because there's not as much for them to get a hold of. The main woman in it, who is played by Laurie Cardeal, she really has some nice moments when she's under extreme sort of stress and pressure. I really liked stuff she was doing.
You can tell she cared about what she was doing. There's a scene where she gets slapped by her. Well, I guess he's her boyfriend, isn't he?
Yeah.
And she apparently was insistent that he slap her for real as hard as he can when they were filming it, and just things like that, I think, come across. I feel like if that was done in Diary of the Dead, it would have been a very theatrical stage slap.
Yeah.
It just...
But then you've got Joseph Pilato, who is essentially the primary antagonist, who is just really caricature villain stuff. And
it's basically exactly the same as the Harry Cooper two-dimensional arsehole we spoke about.
Yeah, except this guy does have more power.
It just comes down on the side of working for me. There's something just lovably camp and chewing the scenery. I think maybe it's because he seems to be doing a kind of Jack Nicholson impression the whole way through. Maybe that's just how he talks. But the way he kind of talks, I don't care what you tell me, Frankenstein. It's that kind of thing.
What else do you want? We've given you the reports for this week. We've given you everything
You've given us
asked
a mouthful of Greek salad. Formulas, equations, a lot of fancy terms that don't mean a thing. I want to know if you're doing something that's going to help us out of this deep shit we're in. Or if you're all in there just jerking each other off.
He actually had a small role in Dawn of the Dead as a policeman at the dock near the start of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Just a bit of trivia for you.
I think it works as a kind of cartoon villain kind of character, but perhaps it's just not quite in keeping with the film. I don't know.
I can completely see how this character would be too much for a lot of people and wouldn't do it for him. It's just on the side of being enjoyably camp for me. I think he brings a lot of energy to the film.
Perhaps part of the problem is that all the military guys, perhaps with the exception of Miguel, they're all just these cackling kind of macho dickheads. And it's just kind of like they're all just
different levels,
Are they? So it's just a bit boring.
Yeah,
really.
Rhodes.
Like, that could be.
Rhodes is all like, Rhodes is just a complete asshole.
He's a psychopath.
Why are you doing that? Listen to my authority. Like he's a dick. Whereas, is it Steele is more into he's more into making jokes about his dick and people's masculinity and giggling about it. I think that's a distinctive difference.
Yeah, but it's just perhaps it's just a bit boring.
Yeah. I think the first 20 minutes of this film are quite possibly, for my taste, the best part of the entire franchise. And the film opens on Sarah in the bunker, kind of looking longingly at a calendar and just looking at how long she's been trapped down there. And then a load of arms come crashing through the wall. And
it's such a great opening.
It's phenomenal. The first time I watched that, I leapt out of my skin because I think I'd recorded this off the TV, and I was gluing my eyes into this crappy little VHS TV combo that I had back in the day, and you just don't expect it, and it's just such a good effect. It's very 1930 silent movie acting that she does, but for the sake of this dream sequence, it's fantastic, I think. And then we cut to her waking up on the helicopter as they're doing a sort of, it's not a reconnaissance mission so much as they're just looking for any survivors that might be anywhere, aren't they? And this opening sequence is among my favourite scenes in cinema. I'm sure Alan's going to scoff at that, but I just think
you'll have to tell me what happens.
Well put together. Well, they land some, for my money, fantastic music is playing in the background. Although I think the score for this film is quite contentious. People can go either way with it, but I love the music in this film. And a man just shouts, "Hello! Hello! Is anyone there? Hello! Hello! Is anyone there?" For a while, and then it's just a ghost town. There's crap all over the streets. We see a newspaper blowing around, and the headline, "The Dead Walk," is on there. And then slowly but surely, these zombies begin to emerge from the woodwork. And it's just like shot after shot of just cool little signifiers of like, oh yeah, society's gone. There's just, wads of cash blowing around in the wind, abandoned. There's alligators wandering around on the street, even though, as blatantly as their mouths are taped shut. I can watch the film with the degree of artistic license and give it that. They're obviously not meant to have their mouths taped shut. There's a zombie who's, I think, officially named Dr. Tongue, who lumbers in. He's the first one.
Is that the one?
Yeah, the first one we see, the one they parody at the start of Shaun of the Dead with the shot of Shaun waking up and yawning.
Is that the zombie, like, without a jaw and
Yes,
it's, like, the title of the movie? Oh, right, yeah, that effect was great. I thought the makeup effects in this were a real step up from... Well, in the previous films, it's just been a bit of grey or green face paint.
The zombies in Dawn of the Dead are, they look like Smurfs or Na'vi from Avatar or whatever. They're just bright blue. We didn't really talk about that last week, did we? The makeup in Dawn of the Dead's pretty poor because everyone's bright blue.
It looks like when you see a colour photo from a black and white film.
Well, that is it. Apparently, so George Romero and Tom Savini claim. Apparently, it looked great in person, but they obviously didn't do enough camera tests, and when they got all the footage back, it just looked bright blue, and they weren't expecting it. But then they just kind of lent into it. George was like, it gives it that kind of comic book vibe I'm after, whatever. So yeah, we go back to the bunker and we are introduced to all the characters kind of one by one. Miguel, who is the boyfriend of Sarah.
Well, yeah, importantly, he's one of the military guys, but obviously him and the main woman there have kind of connected somehow. And so, but that's an element that it feels like that should be more going on there. It feels like it's lost somewhere because we only just sort of established that, maybe there's something going on there and the other military guys don't like him because of that. And then he's already
blatantly been sleeping with her, but she certainly by the start of this film seems to have progressed to a point where she doesn't particularly care for him that much anymore. She's just kind of looking after him.
Yeah, well,
he's an absolute mess.
Trapped in a bunker.
She's caring for him. Yeah.
But he's really having a breakdown straight away. Like he's not sleeping, and the stress of the situation, I'm sure. He's
and I love that as a starting point for this film. I love that's where we open with this character. And then what is it next scene she tranquilizes him to kind of force him to go to sleep because he won't chill out on his own. Yeah,
and he's just really distanced from life. I think he's having some sort of mental breakdown. I like that, and I just think it didn't have enough time to go anywhere or to breathe really. And then the ending for his character just didn't say anything to me particularly. It didn't mean anything for me.
Yeah. So, like I say, I love everything in the film up to this point. Then we're introduced to the scientist characters, and this is the kind of, it's arguably a subplot, but it's kind of the driving force of the plot. There's a character called Dr. Logan, who is nicknamed Frankenstein, who is the sort of lead scientist. There's two scientists still alive at the start of this, aren't there? Not counting Sarah.
Well, yeah. 3 counting Sarah.
Yeah. And they are doing experiments, but Dr. Logan is particularly going off doing, spending all day in his lab.
Yeah, he seems to be the senior scientist. They're just helping him out. He's something of a mad genius scientist.
Yeah.
I mean, they nickname him Frankenstein pretty on the nose. Like he's experimenting on corpses.
Yeah. But he seems to have, they're supposed to be... They're in this dynamic where the military are ensuring the safety and survival of the scientific group, kind of in the proviso that the scientific group are going to find an answer and a cure and a way out of the situation. But Dr. Logan's research is just a lot more general scientific curiosity rather than any obvious goal in mind. And I think most scientists in, reality will say that's how all science is done. Most breakthroughs come when you're not really looking for one thing or the other. You just kind of have to explore.
Yeah, he's just trying to understand how it's all working. But that is the first step to figuring out how to stop it.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. It's very understandable that he wants to figure out, what makes these things tick and why the zombies are there and blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, you can kind of understand that the military are like, well, that's all well and good, but it doesn't solve the here and now problem of the fact that we're trapped in a bunker.
Yeah, well, that's it. This is
dead people.
This is the conflict that are coming up, where the scientists are going look, we just need time to work on this. We need to figure out what's going on, and then maybe we can figure out a solution. And the military are like, no, we need something now, or we're just going to go out and do something. And as Dr. Logan says, well, where are you going to go? And that is a question that never gets answered. Like the military guy is very much just like, no, this science is bollocks. I'm going to go and do something. But then
he's going to blow the piss out of them.
But what he's going to do is never
and
clear.
Logan, because Logan says, "Are you going to blow the piss out of all of them?"
Exactly. Yeah, and but that is a question that never gets answered. And I appreciate that character of Rhodes is just like a psychopathic nutter, but it does feel like that again. It's just sort of a bit too one end of the spectrum and the other kind of like.
Yeah.
I
think there's supposed to be an element of power corrupts, similar to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest that we were talking about a few weeks ago. But it's obviously
all it needed was a concrete thing. Like, we heard there's a base.
This is our
80
plan.
miles away. We're going to take the helicopter and go there. Like, that's all it needed. It just needed a concrete plan of what's the other option.
Yeah, because the only person with an actual concrete plan is John, the helicopter pilot. There's two helicopter pilots who just kind of they're like a neutral party.
Well, the other one's not actually a pilot, is he? I think he's just sort of a tech radio guy.
Radio person.
But they are the kind of neutral figures. Well, actually, what it was...
Yeah. The other one looks like Rowan Atkinson. It's very distracting.
You know what it was? It was so you got your military types. They're kind of the authority figures, but like sort of brutish... not very well thought out kind of people. You got the cool-headed science people who are the ones looking for a solution, and then those two guys seem to represent religion as a separate entity, in a more metaphorical sense. And their opinion. I mean, there's a point where the helicopter pilot guy does a whole speech where he basically said, the zombies are a punishment from God because science is asking too many questions. And that we should just sort of like sit it out. And
so much as
I mean, it's pretty much what he said.
It's not that so much as the hubris of, he doesn't blame science so much as he says we've detonated nuclear bombs and killed ourselves and so on.
I think at one point he says something like, we're being punished for asking too many questions. Something like that.
We've been punished by the Creator. He visited a curse on us. So we might get a look at what hell was like. Maybe he didn't want to see us blow ourselves up and put a big hole in his sky. Maybe he just wanted to show us he was still a boss man. Maybe he figured we was getting too big for our britches, trying to figure his shit out.
I don't know. I as a staunch atheist, I actually really enjoyed his speech on this rewatch, and I love the bit where he says this whole bunker is a 12-mile tombstone or whatever it is, and I think it makes his argument very well in a way that's very believable that a character would feel that way, And it doesn't make me think you fucking dipshit when he says it, because frankly, as not spiritual as I am now, if the dead started coming back to life and trying to eat us and it defied all science as we know it, maybe I would start to reevaluate my concept of how the universe functions.
But I think that's what they're there for. We even see when we finally go into their little caravan, there's a shrine there, a religious shrine. I think that's a definitely deliberate thing, that they are kind of a separate entity to everyone else. They represent the kind of thoughtfulness of religion, but a non-interventionist thing, like let's just sit back, pray a bit, see what happens. And
well, his whole plan, as I say, he's the only one with a solid plan, and it's to go and fly to a beach somewhere and just sit in the sun and like ride out the rest of his life.
Yeah, which is a sensible plan, frankly.
Yeah. I think he has some of the best lines, that character. He's got some great ones.
And he does them in a weird kind of sort of Jamaican accent.
You got your head in the sand. They're going to come up behind you and bite off your arse. And it's okay for me to do that accent despite not being Jamaican, because neither is Terry Alexander.
Ding dong. That's Jamaican Terry Alexander. Oh dear. Well, yeah, it's an odd accent, but, whatever. Let's talk about Dr. Logan a bit more. So the guy who plays him, who's not a particularly well-established actor...
Richard Liberty.
Yeah, I really liked him.
There's a real kind of buddy dynamic between him and Bob the Zombie, played by Sherman Howard, who's probably best known for...
this.
Well, other than this, he's probably best known for, I think he had a guest spot on an episode of Seinfeld. So that's the level that his career took.
But yes, Logan, I quite like this guy. He really reminded me of Jeffrey Combs, actually. The voice is very similar.
I completely agree.
Doesn't look like him.
It's the delivery.
But yeah, the energy. He's got a great mad scientist kind of look, but without being too cartoonish. Yeah. I think the acting style is a little bit on the cartoony side. It's definitely more Rhodes than Sarah, but it's
well. Okay, I like the character. He does some sort of morally suspect things, particularly the point where he's like just revealed that he's feeding remains of the dead soldiers to Bub as a treat.
Yeah.
I mean, from a completely objective, maybe he was, he wasn't thinking completely about the feelings of those around him. But I'm just curious to know whether Romero was intentionally positioning him as being a villain, an antagonist, or what, because he's in this kind of murky grey area, which I quite like, but I don't know what Romero wants me to think about him.
I think he's meant to be a likable character who you're largely on board with, but I think you're meant to kind of take the view of Sarah, which is that perhaps he's gone a bit too far or gone
lost
a bit mad.
Sight of the more important point here.
But, certainly from my point of view, he doesn't do anything morally wrong. It's just a case of, of course that's going to piss those guys off, even though, objectively speaking, it shouldn't. Because, it is just that one of the soldiers dies, as is, commonplace in the apocalypse. There's, people dying all the time. And he just thinks, fresh human remains. I can use that to feed the zombies in my experiments to see if they respond to being fed and given an incentive to behave and so on. There's nothing... He hasn't killed anyone, but he's showing a lack of respect for their remains. But then, who cares? From a scientific point of view...
Yeah, and I think that's it. I think he represents a sort of slightly cold scientific nature, unemotional, but only from that scientific point of view. He's a very emotional character.
Played in a very warm.
Yeah, it would be so easy.
You get the sense that he isn't just a cold, horrible man. He comes across like a really lovable grandpa kind of.
And it would be easy to take that character, even as is in the script, and make him a much more hard, kind of nasty piece of work who doesn't care about anybody. Like if you wanted to portray him as a villain, it would be very easy to do so.
Yeah.
You see, Sarah, they are us. They are the extensions of us. They are the same animal, simply functioning less perfectly. They can be fooled, you see. They can be tricked into being good little girls and boys, the same way we were tricked into it on the promise of some reward to come. They have to be rewarded. Reward is the key. I'm convinced of that now. Come, I've got something to show you.
I think Richard Liberty's really fantastic in this, actually, and I think it's a shame his career never really.
I think from the film point of view, it for me anyway, it just edges a little bit too far into kind of crazy mad scientist territory. But I think that's a failing of the film in general. Just like some things just go a bit too far, and it would have been nice to pull that in a little bit.
It's like you say though, it does have a real Jeffrey Combs energy, and
definitely.
it's kind of weird that Richard Liberty didn't go on to become a kind of horror icon, if nothing else. Someone you get at these horror conventions and so on, signing autographs.
Like Bub.
So let's deal with the Bub situation, because it is a big part of the film. It's a big part of what the film is saying, which I guess is saying they're trainable.
Yeah.
But it's asking us to question like the humanity of the zombies, like, or what are they really, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. I think it really, it picks up from some little cues that are put forward in the earlier films, these seeds that have been planted, and it develops them, and I think, for my money, it's very believable that the zombies, as they've been portrayed, could be trained. They're not going to naturally behave a certain way, but if you not only train them, but feed them, I can completely buy the... Because at the end of this film, Bub seems to have, the intellect of a toddler, if nothing else. He seems to have advanced to that point. But then I can kind of buy that and go with it if the idea with the other zombies is they are starving and hungry and they're trying to feed this base instinct, but Bub has been fed. So, I can completely buy on that kind of instinctive level that a zombie might be more thoughtful after it's been vaguely domesticated, which is Bub. So I'm completely on board with everything that happens with Bub. But I know it does lose a lot of people, because by the end of the film, he is taking revenge, firing a gun, doing a kind of ironic salute to piss someone off.
Yeah.
I think on a level of sort of like, if Boris Karloff as Frankenstein's monster is the high bar for this kind of monster performance, I think that what is his name, Sherman Howard, I think he's actually really good. I think he's quite up there. He's probably my favorite performance in this whole film. I wish it was just him and the doctor, what's his name, Logan.
Yeah. I agree with that.
I'm on board with that as well. I think it's a fantastic performance, and something that's really quite difficult to do well. Like, it would be very easy to do badly, I suppose.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that more in a bit, I suppose. But
So they're like the highlight for me in the mire that is the rest of this thing, which is just like a fantastic 15 minutes at the start. Love it. All the stuff with Bub and Frankenstein is great. And I guess that's why it's really irritating that so much of the rest of the film is so dull, and just these arguments that they have in the staff canteen, and then it's just so long of them running around these caves at the end, and when the zombie horde does finally get let in.
The final act is full-on zombie carnage, that swarm, and I'd say it's far more of that than you get in any of the other films, really, if that's what you're there for. So. But there's a good hour plus that you have to sit through to get to it. But this is one of those films that has been reevaluated with history and has become far more appreciated with time. And now that people have a bit of perspective on it, but I appreciate it's doing a lot of things for me on a personal level that obviously it's not going to do for other people.
Okay. So what are you going to give it?
I give it a 9 out of 10. I love this film. I will concede that the middle does drag a little bit, but I think the start and the ending are fantastic. And if they made a whole film as good as the first 20 minutes, it'd be, my favourite of this franchise.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a lot... I got quite excited watching it in the first, 15, 20 minutes or so, and not that I necessarily think that Romero needs to have a budget to kind of do what... Or maybe he does need to have more of a budget to do what I would like to see, at least. Because I think the opening 15, 20 minutes of this are really good fun, and then it does just... I'd be fascinated to know what his script was like when he thought he had more money, and, I can't imagine it was just all of this
It's available on the
bickering in
internet if you ever want to read it. It's
Well,
widely...
no, I mean, when I say I'm fascinated, I'm kind of like, well, maybe I'll tune into your podcast or you can do one on it. But no,
it's very much split the difference between Day of the Dead as we got it and Land of the Dead. That's pretty much what it is on an island.
Maybe that'd be good. Yeah,
yeah, it would have been nice to see.
The highs are really high in this one. The lows are low. I wasn't. Yeah, no, actually, I was bored in the middle. It's a 7 out of 10 anyway, because I do just love Bub and Dr. Logan and that opening 15 minutes. So it's all for them.
Respectable.
Yeah, there's a lot to like here. I ultimately, for me, it kind of asks more questions than it answers. Yeah, a little bit frustrated. There's bits where I want it to go further and elements that feel a bit cartoony, etc. I feel I gave it what I would consider a generous score, but I did enjoy it, and I thought I better err on the side of generous after last week. I didn't want Saul to get upset.
well, what I think, to be honest, Alan, is I think you watched Day of the Dead 2008, the remake, and realised how good you've got it with these films. But we'll talk about that in a minute.
Anyway, I gave Day of the Dead 7 out of 10, which I think is a generous 7, but a 7 nonetheless.
Yeah. Did neither of you get bothered by the fact that Dr. Logan is shot and doesn't apparently come back as a zombie at the end?
I don't know. Get shot in the head, maybe? Whatever.
Classic bit of fridge logic, that, I think. It never really bothers me when I'm watching the film, but I always remember at the end, like, oh yeah. In the original script, actually, it ended with a character very specifically being shot and not reanimating, but the characters made they made a point of it. It was kind of a hopeful ending, like, oh wow, maybe this whole thing is over and the world can begin to recover now if zombies aren't going to exist anymore. Yeah. So there was one. That was the end of the trilogy for 20 years. But then the zombie renaissance happened, and people started driving trucks of money to George A. Romero's house to ask him to get another film made.
He said, "Send away half this truck. I'm doing it as an 18."
Well, yeah, similar thing happened, but we'll get to that in a minute. Before we get to that, this franchise, as I've said in a previous episode, I think it may be certainly the first franchise where every entry in the trilogy has been remade, or certainly independently remade, because it's not like they are connected, the remakes. Although the producers of the remake of Day of the Dead clearly wanted to confuse the consumer into thinking that their shitty film was a remake or a sequel to Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead.
Yes.
Now, Calvin, I'm guessing you haven't seen this, but Alan, you, if I am correct, bought the 2008 Day of the Dead by mistake, believing it to be the film we were just talking about.
No, I knew it wasn't that.
Okay.
Because I could tell just with the cast and everything. But I just came across it while I was looking for Day of the Dead in the shop. Obviously, it was in the same section. So I thought, I'll get that, in for a penny, in for £1.50, I believe it cost me. But I do have the DVD of Day of the Dead here, and I'd like to raise that immediately.
Set it on fire.
Well, I mean, this is obviously a cheaply produced thing, but could afford Ving Rhames for a couple of days.
So, a company called Taurus somehow got the money together to buy some element of George A. Romero's intellectual property. They obviously got the rights to Day of the Dead. I believe they also bought the rights to Creepshow, the kind of cult favourite Stephen King, George Romero collaboration, sort of anthology thing. I don't know if you've ever seen the Creepshow movies. And they started because it was, the height of the zombie renaissance and the popularity of these films taking off again. they started making a Day of the Dead remake pretty much just as a commercially driven thing to cash in on Dawn of the Dead and a name that they'd obtained. So they actually started with a sequel to Day of the Dead called Day of the Dead 2 Contagium, which I have discussed on this film.
You have mentioned that it's the worst film ever made, I believe.
Yeah, prior to watching God's Not Dead, Day of the Dead 2 Contagion was my least favourite film of all time, and that's not something I throw around lightly. You know, I saw a post on Twitter with loads of replies the other day, and you know, it's what's the worst film you've ever seen? And I was looking at it, and it was replies like Sucker Punch or The Happening, and it was just like, honestly, if the worst film you've ever seen had
Die
a
Another
budget.
Day.
If
1998, The Avengers.
The thing is, I don't know. Have you guys never seen like any of these terrible movies out there?
No.
That just like I've seen films where
Because you watch zombie films. They're all shit.
Well, no, but like I've seen films where you know you can't see what's happening effectively because the cinematography is so incompetent, and the worst film you've ever seen should probably be a film where you say it and someone goes, "What's that? I've never heard of it." And then you have to kind of go, "Oh, it's this weird little thing I saw on whatever." Anyway, Day of the Dead 2 Contagion was for a long while the worst film I'd ever seen. It is an abysmal piece of work. Just no redeeming value whatsoever. And once they'd made Day of the Dead 2, there was brief talk of Day of the Dead 3. Head over and listen to Delay of the Dead episode of How Didn't This Get Made for more info on that. And then they threw together this Day of the Dead remake to get some more money out of this name. Really trying to milk a squeeze... What's the phrase? Squeeze blood out of a stone... Flog a dead horse, milk a cow,
Milk a zombie
bleed
cow.
it dry.
They're trying to milk a dead horse. That's how severe this thing was. But like you say, it had a bit of money behind it because I guess they knew quite effectively we can sell this thing off the back of Dawn of the Dead, the remake. So they hire Ving Rhames off the back of Dawn of the Dead remake to play Captain Rhodes.
Yes. So, I mean, Calvin, you haven't seen this, right? So,
No.
Let me tell you, so this is, of course, a remake of, well, as it says on this DVD cover, based on George A. Romero's Day of the Dead. Now, that appears to be, it has zombies in it. That is the beginning and end of its relationship to Day of the Dead.
No, Alan. No.
Yes.
Because there is a smart zombie called Bud.
Oh.
And no, let's save that, shall we, Alan? Should we talk about him last? But yeah, beyond that, it's a military base as well during a zombie apocalypse. But, you know, it's the start of the zombie uprising in this film. It's not like we're picking up months into this thing.
Yeah, it's totally a different plot and everything.
Yeah. And this film, Calvin, as I think you are familiar, I think we've argued about this before, was directed by Steve Miner. Because
yes.
I think you think Steve Miner's a great director off the back of Halloween H2O 20 years later. I think he's a terrible director off the back of Day of the Dead and Halloween H2O.
Well, no, I think that I expressed that I liked Halloween H2O, and then you went away and watched Day of the Dead 2008, and then looked up the director and saw him, and then just shouted at me about it.
Well, no, I think specifically, I think I complained about the fact that Day of the Dead was being remade. I think I said something like they've got some guy, or you said who's doing it or something. I went, some guy called Steve Miner. You were like, oh, Steve Miner's great. He did my favourite Halloween film or whatever. And we had this sort of, and I went, okay. Then I watched it and then I was like, Calvin, you've got a lot to answer for.
But he is, I mean, what we can do is he's a well-established director who'd been working for quite some time, you know.
Yeah, he's a name. He's a big name on the low-budget horror circuit, certainly. You know, he's not a nobody. He's definitely not the cheapest option they had. And, you know, beyond him, you know, Mena Savari is our lead. Who, you know, she's not exactly Yeah, exactly. But she is a name.
Yeah.
She's not a nobody. She's not bad, actually, to be fair.
Yeah,
she kind of does the best she can with what she's given here. Nick Cannon is in this. Now, I know his name, but I don't actually know.
Nick Cannon?
He's most famous for being married to Mariah Carey.
Oh, that guy!
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus! Didn't he present America's Got Talent or something?
He does a lot of stuff like presenting and He was on the radio for a while. Like, he's more of a personality than an actor, I think.
I didn't want to give this film any money to rewatch it, to refresh my memory, and I found it is available in full on YouTube. And if you look at the comments, it's all people raving about Nick Cannon. So he's obviously got a lot of fans who sought this film out for his sake, but weren't willing to pay for it. This film, right, my main notes are, so firstly, Taurus, this company, I want to hate them so much. Like, they're just piss off. But then I watched the new Creepshow TV series. I got some screeners through for that, and it was actually quite enjoyable, and that's got their involvement. And so I'm in this awkward place now where I don't necessarily hate them anymore. But anyway, something that really pisses me off in this film, the second people turn into zombies, because there's several points where someone's bitten and you see them, go, no, I'm bitten. And then, they look down and look up and they're a zombie. The second they turn, they decay by about, 6 months worth of decay. Just
skin
instantly
just
happens to their face.
off.
But it's like, they cut away and cut back and they've got like decayed skin. So that pissed me off because it's just nonsensical bollock. Like it's like, oh yeah, we know what zombies look like in movies, so they turn into that. Okay, but without thinking about, oh yeah, the zombies look like that in the movies because of reasons. And now, so I had this film down. I hope I'm not really giving this my thoughts away too much here, but I had this down as a 2 out of 10 based on the viewing I gave back in 2008 or whenever it will have been. Rewatching it again this time, I was reminded of the Bud plot in this.
Yeah.
So Bud is a friendly zombie who doesn't want to harm our protagonist, very similar to the original film. But unlike Bub, who was extensively trained by a scientist to behave a certain way and conditioned and, perhaps was a bit of an outlier to begin with, Bud just is friendly for no reason, except that in life he was a vegetarian.
Oh dear.
And that is the point at which I dropped my score down to a 1 out of 10.
Now, come on now. No, so what happens is, Calvin, let me defend.
Well, they make a point of the zombies having retained behaviour and memory, right? But that doesn't make any sense, because if you retain the fact that you are a vegetarian, you would also presumably retain the fact that you don't kill and eat human beings.
Well, that
point.
That is the theory that Mina Savari's character comes up with, but that's speculation.
Yeah, well, it's the only theory proposed as to why he is a friendly zombie who wants to help them and doesn't kill them, and I think at one point picks up a gun to shoot other zombies or something like that. Does he?
Well, I think a more likely kind of reasoning behind it all is because he
was her boyfriend.
Well, he and the Mina Suvari character, he fancies her. Plus, she's his superior officer or whatever she is. So he's kind of deferential to her anyway, and he's quite a placid, kind of nice young man. So when he turns, he still kind of likes her, and so when she tells him to do something, he does it. When he gets ordered to do something, he does it because he's military trained, and I think it just about works.
No desire,
but yeah,
no apparent desire to eat anyone.
Yeah, it should perhaps be if he was more mollified by her, but then he would try and eat Nick Cannon sometimes because he's a dickhead. That might work a bit better.
Well, the other problem is that there's plenty of zombies in this film. So you're asking me to buy this one guy who's just kind of like a normal, nice person?
Yeah, because her mother does try and kill
nice
her.
Person among them. Because it means everyone else who gets bitten must just be a sociopath. It doesn't really track on that level either.
Yeah, well, maybe he's just a nice kid or whatever. But yeah,
the actual thing that made me think, you know what, fuck this film, and like cemented my downgrading to a 1 out of 10 was the final shot where the characters are driving off down the road, the people who survived to the end. And then the film tries to get one last scare in, so it has a zombie like pop up in front of the camera and go "Arr!" at the camera, and then it cuts to the credits. And it's like supposed to be a jump scare, I think, but it's done so profoundly badly. It's just embarrassing. And the makeup in this film shit, by the way.
The CGI is
just badly
absolutely
made.
appalling. Really crap CGI. A lot of, Nick Cannon at one point gets a machete and he's just cutting zombies' heads off and stuff. Like, these zombies are all made of melon, judging by how easy it is to chop them up. Really, I know that's something that most zombie films are guilty of, but it's particularly bad.
So, Alan, what would you give it out of
10? Do you know what?
And can I ask, in all seriousness, does this help you to appreciate why I like Survival of the Dead and don't hate Diary of the Dead watching this sort of a film?
No. I think this is definitely better than Diary of the Dead.
Really?
Far superior, yeah.
That's insane.
This is very basic, low expectation kind of stuff. It's throwing in some action. It's going to throw some zombies at you. You're going to see some cool explosions.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because we both get really pissed off at films that don't make any sense. But for you, it's like the character decisions and motivations don't make any sense. Where for me, it's like the very fabric of their reality and like the rules that they, like the science that they live with doesn't make any sense. That's what pisses me off, I think.
I guess so, yeah. But yeah, I found it perfectly watchable. It was 80 minutes long. That's exactly what I want in a film, in a crap film. It wasn't crap. It was fine. The acting actually was fine.
Crap, Alan.
It was fine.
It's so crap.
It's not crap. It's not good. Anyway, I gave it a 5 out of 10.
More. Again, that's 2 points higher than you gave Dawn of the Dead, the original.
Well, this one didn't anger me. That's why.
What did you give Halloween H2O?
That it didn't anger you, because this isn't just me rallying against this film. I'm looking it up. It's got a 4.5 out of 10 on IMDb, which really is a score relegated for like bottom of the barrel trash. It's not.
Yeah.
Fine, whatever. That's
Calvin. I gave Halloween H2O 2 out of 10.
Oh, goodness!
Quite generous, actually.
What did you give Halloween 6? The actual worst Halloween.
I don't know. What's it called? I'll look it up. Halloween 6.
The Curse of Michael Myers.
6, probably. Okay.
Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers. I gave that 1 out of 10.
Ooh. Okay. Steve Miner didn't direct that one though.
No.
Alan, did you watch the other remake?
No.
Oh, we see. As I say, Taurus. Like, I wasn't kidding. They are like unbelievable. They remade the film again.
Shameless.
In 2017, Day of the Dead Bloodline. They called it this time, but it's very much another remake rather than a spin-off or what have you. For my money, much, much, much better than the previous attempt to remake the film. Still terrible. But the main distinction is, again, Bub is the only real element that, makes it through, other than the zombies, obviously. It's much better directed. There's some kind of zombie action in the streets at the start, which is competently put together. People running around, avoiding zombies. It's actually not terrible all the way through. Yeah, basically, they reimagine Bub as a creepy stalker in this film. It's very weird. Basically, there's this guy, Max, who is obsessed with Zoe in life and like carves her name into his arm, and he's just obsessed with her, and he stalks her and he tries to rape her, and then the zombie outbreak happens and he becomes a zombie, and with no justification or explanation, he is smart like Bub, to the point that he can talk in a kind of "I am zombie" kind of way. And he decides he like goes after her very specifically because he's a creepy stalker. So he's not just like eating people. Like, there's a zombie outbreak going, and they are typical zombies eating people, turning them into zombies. But for no reason, this one zombie is like taking children hostage to get Zoe to be his and all that sort of stuff, and licks her face and stuff, and they get a kind of Alien 3 creepy moment out of it. And to be fair to the guy, it's a very good performance, but it's not a character or a performance I really need to see realised or want to see realised. A kind of creepy sex zombie is very unpleasant. But he has got a great face for like creepy grins and so on. The plot doesn't make any sense, and ultimately Zoe beats him by chopping off his head. And the film's terrible. But it is better, much better than the previous one, which Alan inexplicably likes. So, by my estimation, 3 times better than that film. I gave it 15 out of 10. Well, you should check it out, Alan, because you'll love it. I am sure in about 5 years' time, Taurus will remake Day of the Dead again. So, yeah, we've got that to look forward to. Anyway, George A. Romero, as we said, picked up the reins. There was the zombie renaissance of the early 2000s with 28 Days Later, Resident Evil, Dawn of the Dead remake. All these films kind of made... Oh yeah, Shaun of the Dead. All these films kind of made people get really into zombies again. And there was a massive appetite to get George A. Romero back for another zombie movie. And he'd tried to get a few zombie like films off the ground between Day of the Dead and this. He talked about wanting to do a kind of Twilight of the Dead, I think he called it, and you know that's essentially what became Land of the Dead. When he got the money, I think he dusted off some of his old ideas. But yeah, they basically gave him the biggest budget of his entire career to do pretty much whatever he wanted with zombies in it. So we got Land of the Dead, which I have mixed feelings about. Okay. I would say horror fans of these films were very enthusiastic about this being made and coming out. It was quite heavily hyped on that circuit. So yeah, it picks up 3 years after the initial outbreak, Night of the Living Dead. So the furthest into the timeline out of any of these films, very much set. The other films feel set in our world, even if it's kind of our world falling apart. This film feels like it's set in a alien world completely.
Post-apocalyptic,
you know,
isn't it? Yeah,
sci-fi, like yeah, exactly. The other 3 are apocalyptic, whereas this is post-apocalyptic. I suppose that's the distinction.
Which I did quite like. Like, after watching a lot of these relatively quickly after each other, it was quite nice to not have a film where it's people reacting to, oh, the zombies are a thing, and we need to... As much as I praised those elements of Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, it's nice that we're just in, and and I guess in Romero's floating timeline for his sort of series, if we're taking it all as sort of one chronology, this is the furthest in the future from Night of the Living Dead. Yeah.
Substantially so as well. I mean, at Day of the Dead, it's ambiguous where it actually lies, but I think it's generally regarded as being a matter of months after the outbreak. So basically the premise is it's kind of dystopian future, post-apocalyptic world. There are outposts in various cities that have cropped up, and all the rich hoity-toity people have kind of become an upper class who live one way. They are, waited on and kept in supplies and so on by a kind of second working class who go out into the wasteland and scavenge and so on. And then there's a kind of, poverty-stricken bunch of people just living in a slum and the outskirts of the city. Yeah, it's about a group of characters. Riley is this guy who wants to just kind of leave and go and live in Canada, get away from it all because he hates this life here. Cholo, played by John Leguizamo, is trying to work his way up to live in luxury and in Fiddler's Green, the upper class, hoity-toity society. And it's a kind of Super Mario Brothers reunion because Dennis Hopper is our villain in this one.
He's very much a King Koopa figure.
Yeah. So I mean, right off the bat, I mean, this is money, basically, but it's a cast of, you know, recognizable names in a way that you never get in any other George A. Romero.
Couldn't get Bob Hoskins,
not just like,
but, you know,
not just horror names, you know, like Tony Todd, like actual mainstream names. You've got John Leguizamo, who I would say is a fantastic actor. Certainly does what he does very well. You've got Dennis Hopper, who I love.
I'm curious to know where you're going after naming those two.
You've got a very competent, bland, white Hollywood lead man.
Yes.
Simon Baker.
yeah,
He had a very
whatever.
small role in Devil Wears Prada.
Yeah.
He's the mentalist,
And,
isn't he? That's what he does now.
Oh, okay.
He's done it. Yeah, found himself a good spot on a TV show. He's been doing that for 10 years.
You've got Dario Argento's daughter.
Nepotism.
And there's a lot of just good faces, you know, filling out these little
Are there?
roles. Yeah.
Who?
Like, whoever it is who's playing that kind of guy who's with all the people stuck by the electric fence, who's like, we're fucked. He's got a good sort of nerdy businessman face about him, don't you think? Or the guy who's Kaufman's waiter, butler kind of guy. He's got a nice kind of energy.
I saw Tom Savini. He pops up.
Yeah, I love that little Easter egg for the fans there. He is of course playing Blade, his character from Dawn of the Dead, but now a zombie, using his machete.
This does feel like the most sort of... Well, I guess it's the least Romero and the most kind of... I don't want to say commercial, because I know that, like, Tom Savini being in it isn't necessarily... But, you know, it's a little thing for the fans. It's playing on the history of the thing. It's self-aware in some ways. Simon Pegg and Nick Frost are obviously in here as well, so that's...
Edgar Wright,
that's Oh, Edgar Wright, okay. Oh, I thought he was a bit too slim to be Nick Frost. That's it, actually. In that same scene, we see a bunch of... it's
They're
like,
on the poster, those two, yeah.
This is a scene sort of like in the slums. There's this area where you know you can have your photo taken with a zombie, and there's like...
I love that scene. That's pure what I want from a George Romero zombie movie. Just that kind of playful montage. I mean, it's very quick, but just seeing these people in this kind of... What is it, like a scummy nightclub, but just, you know, shooting paintballs at zombies and stuff, just having a laugh. Yeah, Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright are zombies you can have a photo taken with a zombie in a kind of safe setting with. Not massively convinced that would be a big draw 3 years into the zombie apocalypse, after presumably everyone there has like survived the zombie outbreak in real life. But
I do have to ask, because there's a market stall selling like just spam in this sequence.
Spam.
Well, I was going to bring this up actually in our first of the Dead series episode, because in Diary of the Dead, Romero like just directly quotes the Monty Python Dead Parrot sketch. In dialogue, there's someone says like, "What's wrong with him?" and someone says, "He's dead. That's what's wrong with him." Which is just, I mean, that's just a complete lift. I can't buy that he would write that in accidentally. And now I see spam here. I'm like, has he ever talked about his Monty Python's influence on his work?
No, but I can completely buy that Monty Python is to him what the Three Stooges are to Sam Raimi. I can completely believe he'd be a fan. He's you know, he obviously likes comedy. He was a big fan of Shaun of the Dead. He obviously does have a slight hint of the slapstick about and surreal about his sense of humor that comes across in some of these films. That you know, his cameo in this film is a puppeteer doing a kind of Punch and Judy show. He just shouts, "Take that, you smelly zombie!" a lovely little bit of humor, I think.
Well, I thought Dennis Hopper was a very sort of, that's a character unlike anything else in this film, and I didn't know if that was Dennis Hopper playing it as such, or if it was Romero's direction. But like, Dennis Hopper is this complete cartoon sort of villain with the line deliveries and, you know, the swilling the whiskey and all of his suits around him and everything.
If you're going to cast Dennis Hopper, that's what you're going to get, right?
Well, I guess so. I didn't know if he was drunk or if Romero was encouraging this performance or what was going on there, really. But it was so
I quite
jarring.
like it, though. No one casually murders a man like Dennis Hopper. It's just very nice.
I love that when he's on the phone and the guy's like, "Oh, you know, we got the guy," so he then immediately regrets killing this guy and just sort of goes, "Oh, I just did something I might not have." Like, it's so underplayed.
Exactly,
to be
it's a beautiful moment because it is like, shit. I mean, I'm happy to kill people, but I don't need only if I need to. You know, it's just
he was good help, that man. I really like him in this film, but I think it is purist Dennis Hopper. Like, George Romero cast him to be him and either didn't dare direct him further, or he wouldn't take direction, or that he was just happy with him being his pure understilled self. I
think it works.
I think it's that character as written. I think, to be honest, that's kind of what. And the same goes for John Leguizamo. You know, he's having great fun chewing the scenery, but you really kind of warm to his character, I think, and get on board with him. I think that's just John Leguizamo being such an inherently charismatic man, but it's
I was hoping he was just going to take the reins from Simon Baker throughout so much of like the
real
first
problem
45
here,
minutes.
The kind of Jeremy Renner type in the lead. But the problem with that is it's not just that he's a bland kind of actor. There isn't much of a character there either, and the whole film for me I got a bit, not exactly lost, but just unfocused about what the hell we were actually dealing with. Like, because he's going on about how he's going to go and catch John Leguizamo and stop him being a terrorist, but he obviously sympathises with him, but then he wants to save the city, but then he just wants to get away from it all. He wants to bring down King Cooper, but then he's on his payroll. It was just like...
Well, he wants to be a good guy and save the day, but simultaneously he wants to step away from it all and have nothing to do with anything. And that is his conflict of character. That
it never comes across as conflict. It just comes across as kind of vagary.
It's that, so he's that kind of one last heist kind of man, isn't he? He's just that sort of. I think another great character in this film, he's got a lot of personality about what he does and very well performed, is Charlie. Robert Joy. It doesn't sound like you like him.
No,
no,
really.
I think Robert Joy gives a great performance as Charlie.
Oh, no, I hated it. It was just really unconvincing, and
Calvin doesn't
the
like
dialogue.
The mentally ill. It's
that's true.
The dialogue didn't help, like where he's like calling fireworks sky flowers and stuff. It felt like he should be like 16 years old or something, not, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I watched Lawnmower Man recently, and it did have a whiff of that about it. But
I think I know what you mean, though. I think it is a solid performance. Like, he's doing a nice job, but it just, again, like a lot of things in this film, it feels unfocused as to what it's actually trying to achieve in any sense.
Yeah, well, I think it's just George A. Romero's, habit of just giving side characters a big defining personality trait to stop them being boring, but it's not necessarily woven into the film beyond that. But I do wonder if the name Charlie is a reference to Flowers for Algernon. Is that the name of that book?
Algernon.
Algernon, yeah.
I was getting the big guy from Of Mice and Men vibes for a bit. What's it? Yeah. Lenny and the other one. That's what
Lenny and Carl, isn't it? That's what.
But that was sort of what the whole Simon Baker, Robert Joy thing. I thought they were maybe going for an Of Mice and Men kind of thing, but then it never really.
The big kind of message of the film seems to be, social inequity and the working class kind of rising to bring down the 1%ers sort of thing.
Yeah, it's arguably a bit ahead of its time. I mean, this film is very blatantly and, on the record, a reaction to the Bush administration and the Iraq War. And I like that about it. It's very much about the era in which it was made, which is very true of certainly the original 3 films in this series. Yeah, it's commenting on that. I don't know, the message feels somewhat muddied because, it starts to get into territory of like, hang on, are you saying the Iraqi people are zombies? Is that what this is? I don't quite know what.
Well, I guess the idea is like we grunts on the ground could probably relate more to those that we're supposed to be fighting against than the people we're fighting for.
Exactly, yeah.
And because at the same time as all this stuff's going on, the zombies having their own little uprising in a sort of
I get much like Bub in Day of the Dead. It's very much a side plot, but also very much the driving focus of the entire film. So we pick up in this film with a sequence of just zombies out, unbothered, like no humans to worry about. So they're just wandering around, playing with things that they obviously liked in life. There's a zombie trying to play a trumpet or something in a music stand.
Yeah.
There's, it's just that kind of thing. And I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea that these zombies have been around so long that they are bored of trying to eat people. They're just like picking up random things and memories. There's no people to distract them. I can go with that if I have to. But then there is this sort of central character, Big Daddy. The leader of the zombies, who is played by Eugene Clark, who's a kind of spiritual successor to Bub. And he pretty much picks up where Bub left off at Day of the Dead in terms of having the intelligence of a toddler and being able to reason and plan and empathize. And
they're still eating people.
Well, this is what I mean. It's fucking nonsense, isn't it? It doesn't make any fucking sense. And,
yeah.
And it's just annoying because, but it's like, if a zombie can feel pain and empathize, then it shouldn't still be trying to eat people. Because our empathy goes
that's like
beyond
saying, why do we ever
our
go
own
to war and
species.
kill people that we don't know? Surely we can empathise with them.
Yeah. But then the problem is we're asked to be on this. I think we're meant to see Big Daddy as an anti-hero, if nothing else. I think we're kind of meant to be on his side.
Yes.
Like, what? They're shooting zombies?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, they're shooting these fucking flesh-eating monsters that destroyed the world. Of course they are.
Yeah.
You have no, like... They don't know they have any semblance of feeling or emotion. They don't in the other films. So, like, where are we meant to have picked that up along the way?
The whole thing is so schizophrenic. Like, the ending in particular is where the main characters come across zombies sort of feasting on innocent people, and it's this, like, downbeat, like, oh, God, it's all... And then they blow them up. And then, literally 2 minutes later, they see another group of zombies, and it's like, they're on their way. Leave them be. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. Like 2 minutes ago, it was a horrific sight seeing all of these zombies. So are we just okay with them if they're not eating people? Or it's really confusing and strange.
Well, I think it's about that. It's about that kind of vagary of war. They're the enemy.
Yeah,
and sometimes they're doing things that are directly killing us, but also they're just trying to get on with their own shit. And I think it's trying to kind of do that sort of thing, but it is a bit confused.
The attack they lead on Fiddler's Green is very much, retaliation for their own little lives being attacked by these scavengers. So it's arguably justified, but it just doesn't play because basically, if this film opened with Big Daddy breaking out of a laboratory where we've seen scientists have been experimenting on him, fine. If it was even just Bub from Day of the Dead reprising the role, even if they'd gone with a new actor covered under the makeup, because there are several zombies in this that look exactly like Bub just because of the makeup they've done on them anyway. Even if they'd done that, I think it would work. But the fact that we're just meant to buy this zombie has just kind of got smart.
Yeah, and
Because
like
it's
what
been
we
sat
what we
there
see of him,
on-
he's pumping gas. Like that's what his memory is. So it's not like he was like a real intellectual. Anyway, you know, maybe he was. He's one of those intellectuals who works in a gas station.
There's a big moment at the end where he kills Dennis Hopper's character by pumping gas, and if that was played like an ironic bit of retained memory coming out at a time that's bad for Dennis Hopper, great. But it doesn't play like that. It plays like Big Daddy going, "Oh, what a perfect ironic way for me to kill you now." So I'm not a big fan of all this, although I find it entertaining to watch. You know, I don't want to sound too downbeat on it. Like, it's schizophrenic, but there are interesting ideas here, and they are presented in a way that I think is entertaining. The zombie stuff specifically. You know, I give it a very generous 7 out of 10, and that's very generous, really. But yeah, I can sit through it and enjoy it. It's got enough little bits and pieces for me.
Yeah, there were elements. Dennis Hopper was fun. John Leguizamo's good, but if either of those two weren't in a scene, I was just a bit bored. And then there was some nice, like, the more artier edits of, like, I think there's some, like, quite impressive and very cool, like, bits of gore and all that kind of stuff, but it just feels really weird, and I can only imagine how, like, Universal felt, who distributed this film, presumably funded a big chunk of it, that you kind of...
I think Universal were pretty happy with it. I think Universal wanted a sequel. But bear in mind, this is a huge budget for George A. Romero, but for a blockbuster film, which is what this was, when it came out, it's very low budget.
Oh, of course,
you know,
yeah.
It doesn't need to make much money to be a highly profitable film for them.
But just the fact that this came after, like, 28 Days Later and Dawn of the Dead, like those preceded this, and this feels just like a step back in terms of the genre, and I guess it's a step back so that Romero can just kind of explore his sort of slightly confusing and somewhat contradictory visions about capitalism and whatnot. The Iraq War, apparently, whatever. And it's just so messy and weird, and I can't sympathise with the zombies in this one. Like, I just about get there with Bub in Day of the Dead, and partly because I think that's a really great performance that the actor gives. Here, it's just...
Well, I think the important thing is we've never seen Bub, like, harm someone, and for all we know, he's never eaten a person, who hasn't been fed chopped up, having already died. Like, do you know what I mean? He's innocent in that regard, and he in movie terms, he seems like a good being.
Yes,
who doesn't wish harm upon others. Whereas, even if Big Daddy is the same thing, he's ultimately a revenge movie. He's ultimately out to harm. Yeah, that's his entire.
Yeah, but the idea is that we understand why.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't like revenge movies. I don't like Lucky Number 11 because we're meant to cheer when
what an odd
protagonist kills the.
Yeah, who's seen Lucky
guys.
Number 11 since it came out?
Yeah,
and obviously that's not quite what this is, but it just it doesn't quite work.
Yeah,
as intended.
No, I agree. But that being said, I guess there is a watchability to it for the fact that it did have the money behind it. It's a proper studio thing, so it is within the conventions of what passes as sort of mass-produced entertainment. And I guess it's watchable. I gave it a 5 out of 10.
Yeah. I'll just concur with that, I guess. Watchable, but also very forgettable. 5 out of 10.
Yeah. I'm not going to contest that. I think that's pretty reasonable. And to hear more about the sequels that could have been, go check out How Didn't This Get Made? That other show that I've been putting out.
This really was a case of diminishing returns for me, at least. Alan, have you kept track of your ratings? Like, mine have, like, over the course of the 6 films, they did decrease quite rapidly from, a 10 with Living Dead to a 2, I think I gave Survival.
Yeah, I think it's something along those lines, certainly.
bear in mind, now, Alan's all over the place. Alan gave Night of the Living Dead a 9 out of 10. Then he gave Dawn of the Dead a 3 out of 10.
Oh, yes.
That
Then
was
he
an
gave
emotional
Day of the Dead a
response,
7
though.
out of 10. So Alan's just ups and downs.
Yeah.
Like, life is a roller coaster.
Life is a roller coaster. Just gotta ride it. Well, that was an interesting thing. I don't really want to watch another zombie film for a while, I don't think.
I know, I was really craving some zombie action, and I do feel like, right, it's like when you eat too much fast food, even though you were really craving it, and you just feel ill.
I think it's the state of the world currently that has had more of the effect on it. Like, normally at this time of year, I'm like, yeah, horror films, but now I'm like, don't know, I might just watch Location instead.
Right, thanks guys, happy Halloween.
Yeah, good fun, happy Halloween.
What's next week, Alan? SpongeBob?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Spooky.
Take that, you smelly zombie!